All right, and welcome everyone to the Ginette Biro Podcast. I'm Ginette Biro, and today I have a fantastic guest here who is going to do a deep dive with me. I'm going to follow you along, really, and we're going to talk about ancient sites, spiritual and galactic activities at these sites. We may tangent into vibrations, frequencies, sound harmonics. I have no idea. We're just going to roll. But my guest today is Neil Gaur. He is the founder of portaltoascension.org. Neil was born in London in the UK and moved to Southern California at the age of 12. Neil was raised in a Hindu family, but really as he started growing was asking questions of more, deep questions, the root of things. Why this? Why that? And that always inspires me. I want to know more about people who are asking the why questions. And so years of his seeking and seeking deep answers to our origins, spirituality, eventually led him to creating portaltoascension.org, which really you guys host and create and provide avenues for events, deep conversations, seminars, and so much more. So I'm thrilled to have you on the show. Neil, welcome.
Thank you. So good to be here with you. I'm excited to connect with you.
Yeah, this is great. So Neil, I'm so curious your experiences of maybe some of the coolest sites you've been to. I know I've been to a couple, specifically in Egypt, where I had profound experiences there. But I would love to know, like, what has drawn you to those ancient sites and what are some things you're experiencing?
So as I was raised and I went to school and did history classes, I was never really interested in history, right? And then I started realizing when I got a little older that every single country that you go to basically speaks about history in their own way, right? Based on their own basically something that kind of like supports them being their own world power. And since I was in England, I had a whole different avenue of historical awareness than when I came to the US at age 12 in 7th grade, middle school. So in England, I was learning about like King Henry and the kings and all that. And when I came over to the US, I was learning about like the Civil War, Revolutionary War, and none of it really interested me until I graduated high school and I was 18 years old in 2000, and I started writing spoken word poetry. And in my poetry, it was more like sci-fi poetry, you know, like black holes, intergalactic stuff, but I really wasn't into any of this awareness, even though that could be argued that maybe there was just some sort of awareness that I was connected to, you know, I just wasn't linearly into it enough to be like, this is what I'm interested in. And I started doing some research. I was also very curious on Hinduism, like why I was raised in this religion. I never really believed any of it, what all these beings and gods represented. I was kind of like what I considered myself to be as an atheist Hindu, you know, like I followed the rites and rituals, but I wasn't really into it. Yeah. So pretty soon I stumbled onto some information that showed that Christianity had some origins in even more ancient civilizations. And as a Hindu being raised in England, I celebrated Christmas. I watched Kings of Kings every Christmas. I believed in Jesus, but I didn't worship Jesus. But most Hindus don't have a disbelief against Jesus. And that also comes from the fact that Hinduism is one of the only religions that doesn't have a way to convert people, like a conventional conversion. Whereas many other religions came about, they literally went on crusades to convert people in the mass. And because Hinduism doesn't have that, and I wasn't raised in India, indoctrinated with exclusive Hinduism, I already had an open awareness to the fact that many other religions probably did exist. And I also read some of the Indian scriptures that said different religions come onto the planet at different times based on the culture and the time of that place, right? We can't all just have the same information because we all have different backgrounds and different cultures, and one piece of information won't fit with every culture. So with that being known, I already accepted that Jesus was probably real. And then I came onto, just from searching the internet, the Sumerian tablets of creation, right? And I started looking at the Sumerian tablets, and all of a sudden I stumbled onto a story called the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I actually just did a conference last weekend, a 10-hour event called Ancient Sumer and Mesopotamia Online Conference with 7 people on Sumer. And my presentation was an hour-long presentation on Gilgamesh. So I'm like fresh from that, right? And the reason why I did that presentation was because I wanted to bring it back home to my original awakening to this. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, we find out that it's a flood story, and Gilgamesh interacts with Upnapishtim, who is Noah, that was then taken into the Old Testament and then used by Christianity. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. Noah's flood story comes from this story? that dates back thousands of years before. Well, what else is there? Oh, wait a second. In the beginning, well, we were created in the image of the Elohim, an Old Testament thing. Well, that comes directly from the Sumerian scriptures. Oh, another story here about Moses being sent in some kid being sent in a basket down a stream and then picked up by a priestess. The Moses story. So to me, it was like, okay, either the number one religion on the planet or three top religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, are completely BS, or you need to go back to the original source code and the root of it all and look at that. So I started looking at the original source code. And when I was looking at that, all of a sudden we weren't talking about God anymore. We were talking about star beings. And I was like, sky people, star beings? Like, and this is where God came from. Elohim is actually plural and it's gods. And then Yahweh was one out of many gods. Even in the Old Testament, Yahweh said, worship me over the others. It's right in it's not even not conventional. It's not even unconventional. That's conventionally accepted. Yahweh made them choose it out of all the different deities. So that's what really like started me going down the rabbit hole. But the four individuals that I found in the beginning were, I'll tell you what they represent. So you kind of know that it was a really full spectrum awareness from the beginning. Nassim Haramein, how to connect mathematically that we're all one, right? Through science and quantum physics, realizing that we're all interconnected. I was a linear-minded Indian kid, right? Math and all that stuff. So I was like, whoa, I can linearly prove that we're interconnected. And then Jordan Maxwell, the occult, the secret societies, the bloodlines coming out of Sumeria. Oh my God, we've been hijacked and controlled within this matrix for all these years, and they've been following this bloodline from these gods, the sons of gods, also an Old Testament reference. And then Jim Self, the Merkaba light body. We have a light body and we can transcend and live simultaneously and astrally, right? And then the last one was William Henry, ancient aliens, investigative mythologist, Egyptian connection. So that was all 2001 to 2003, from 19 to 21. And I just went down the rabbit hole for years after that. And it kind of went down conspiracy route for quite some time, but I just continued to collect information until eventually I had more of a spiritual awakening and then created Portal to Ascension.
That's amazing. What a journey, hey? And there's so much more to that too, right? Like you're giving us highlights of it.
Yeah.
There's so much more, but I can really understand that. I know I've gone down similar, just like, oh my gosh, and this and this and this. And it can be really overwhelming as much as it is also really profound. Right. Yes. And so taking all of that, what are some of the most, actually, I'm going to ask you this way. What is your understanding of sacred sites on our planet and like galactic beings or spiritual experiences? What's your understanding of them?
Okay. So when it comes to sacred sites and the galactic connection, we need to break this down a little bit here, because let me just say this as a disclaimer at first, that there is a pushback on a lot of people saying that these ancient sites were from extraterrestrials, because they feel that it takes away credit from the advancement of humanity they might have had in the past, right? So I feel there's a combination going on here. There's three different possibilities. Either humanity in general was at a very advanced state that we were able to do this, ourselves, or there was even a more advanced civilization that passed this awareness down, right? Or we were told by extraterrestrials and galactic beings on how to create things, or even given assistance to it, right? From my research, I feel all of the things happened. I think that humanity, some of the ancient sites that exist are way older than we've been told. Maybe we'll get into that, like the Sphinx, for example, and the pyramids in Egypt. And it might be about 13,000 years ago, but there's also evidence that suggests it was 26,000 years before that, which was 36,000 years ago, which is extremely old. And there could have been a really advanced civilization that encompassed the whole planet. Or we could have the Atlantean theory, which is that Atlantis existed, and then in three phases, Atlantis started, declining and eventually went out. And as they were doing this, they sent out basically satellite offices, if you will, where different pieces of the information were taken all over the world, including Egypt. And the original name of Egypt is Kemet. Egypt was given to it by the Greeks in like 300 BC. And they embedded the information and awareness within their structures, in the way they created everything, and in this scriptures, like Thoth, for example, who's known as Thoth the Atlantean, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, Atlantis quite possibly was a space faring civilization where they were possibly in communication with galactic beings, or even were hybridized from ETs and galactic
Mm-hmm.
beings. And now the other theory, which is if you go to ancient Babylon, say you were there a few thousand years ago in ancient Sumer, and you find out all this amazing information, the Pythagorean theorem, right, is there, the 60 based number system, the times, the clocks, the degrees of a circle, everything came from there, right? And then you find and you go there and you ask them, where did you get this information from? Who told you it? They would say it came from the star people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go
Mm-hmm.
to indigenous tribes and go back far enough in the Americas to their scriptures, and then you find out where their scriptures say they got it from, star people, and or spiritual experiences created by psychedelics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even with Pythagoras, we see that he was experimenting with psychedelics to get downloads from star beings. Like that's part
Mm-hmm.
of some of the people that said that. So there is a connection to an advanced human race, but when it comes to the galactic connection, if it isn't a tangible, actual experience of these galactics being on this Earth, it's definitely the original seeding of humanity that happened from an intergalactic community, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we were probably Homo erectus on this planet, going back to the Sumerian scriptures. And then what happened is there was some sort of influence or some sort of hybridization that occurred from some star beings that evolved us to another level of species, from Homo erectus to Homo sapien. And if you look at the conventional timeline of history, many of the evolutionary traits work out perfectly, but one thing is an anomaly. Homo erectus became Homo sapien in a very short period of time,
Mm-hmm.
things that normally take a long, long period. So, and we have two theories, right? We have creationism, right, which is like the Christian kind of view of Earth is only 6,000 years ago, which is the last flood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have evolution. So we have two extremes. But to me, it's actually both. We were evolving, and then we were created and became sentient and aware. And that's kind of just like throwing out some, I'm rambling a little bit here, but going all
That's
over the
okay.
place. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on it.
That's fair, because that's the thing when talking about these ideas and theories, it's so hard to just keep it linear because there's so many parts that feed into it, and it really is multidimensional, right? The causes are multidimensional. They're not linear either. So I understand why it feels like you're all over, but I'm following you very much so. Now, do you think that sacred sites are still active portal sites to these higher dimensions and things currently, or do you think these sacred sites are dormant now? What's your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. I feel that a lot of these sacred sites have become dormant, but some of them are just like subtly still active. And that as we ascend and go into this higher octave of existence, as we're moving up into these ages, that a lot of them are going to come back online. That it's actually at a frequency, specific frequencies actually kickstart these portals from opening. And as we go lower, I don't like to even say higher and lower, as we become disharmonic, right, we're not able to actually access these portals. So there are definitely stargates on the planet that at certain levels of awareness, consciousness expansion, that we can probably utilize to not only go interdimensionally and travel the rest of the universe, but also probably gives us some insight about who we are in our ancient history that goes beyond, the conventional timeline of that we were primitive beings and then we linearly evolved to here. Because that was one of my first realizations, actually, was understanding that we are not the most advanced that we've ever been on this planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really interesting too. And that's a good perspective that humans should remember. Because sometimes I think the whole of humanity gets this really egoistic view of like, well, everything, we are humans, therefore we are the best. But it's like we are still growing in very much a seed-like state compared to a lot of other civilizations, right? Like we're still climbing the ladder. We're not at the top of the ladder. Okay, so I want to talk about sound harmonics now too.
Yes.
So I had an experience in a pyramid in Dashur in Egypt, and it had this like beveled pattern on the ceiling of it. And I remember when we would sing certain frequencies or notes, like you could sing a song and it was beautiful, but if you would sing certain notes, it would reverberate and everyone in there instantly were in this like meditative state. It was so
Mm,
fantastic, phenomenal. And I was amazed at the ability to create such a structure that was so
yeah,
everlasting, that
right,
had such a power. And it's like, if you didn't know that, you couldn't activate it.
yeah.
Right? I mean, how many do you think that's kind of key in most sacred sites, that there's a sound harmonic type thing?
Not okay. So sacred sites, because if we talk about ancient sites, probably not, because there's all types of different things. There were primitive cultures and there weren't, right? When it comes to
Mhm.
sacred sites, and if we're specifically categorizing and defining sacred sites as sites that are put in certain areas because of their energy, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of sacred sites are on ley lines, they're on certain grid works of earth, literally positioned completely in alignment with certain meridians of the planet, as almost as if they knew it. And a lot of time those are really advanced structures, way more advanced than we know, and are utilizing harmonics. There's
Mhm.
many sacred sites in the world. To say that and they all have that component, I wouldn't know because I haven't seen them all, right? However, one of the topics that I speak about the most would be sound vibration in ancient sites, right?
Mhm.
And because
Mhm.
when I first got into all this, the first thing I realized with the Sumerian scriptures is they were talking about an advanced level of quantum physics and how everything is sound. And then I went to in the beginning was the word. Well, in the beginning was the word means in the beginning was vibration. And
Mhm.
I did another presentation called Origin Stories of Ancient Civilizations, which I'm doing on Portal to Ascension again in 2 months. And it's a 3-hour expose on 300 different origin stories of humanity. And in there's a whole hour-long section on sound and vibration in origin stories. And
Mhm.
almost every origin story speaks about sound being the first component, right?
Yeah.
And these are basically through metaphors and through fictional stories, if you will. They're not really fictional. They're speaking about sound. Like in the beginning was the word. Well, was there actually a literal word flying? No, it's talking about frequency, right?
Mhm.
The universe was sung into existence. Well, was there a person singing there? Probably not, but that means frequency, you know?
Mhm.
So that was something that I found out a lot in ancient stories. And a component of spiders and some extraterrestrial connection in many origin stories. So what it looked like to me was in the beginning was a vibration. We all came from this one singularity vibration. And then the metaphor for how it fractalized out was a spider web. A spider went
Mhm.
out. What do we have? Sacred geometry, the fractalization from the singularity to the infinite experience of duality. So that was my like, because I loved understanding quantum physics in the beginning theoretically. And so as I started realizing this and working with more and more speakers, Brian Forrester, Michael Tellinger, and just collecting all this information, I realized that a lot of these ancient structures were built with harmonics in mind. And a
Mhm.
little tangent here before we get back to talking about that is when we talk about ancient civilizations being more advanced, automatically our technological minds in this reality right now start thinking technologically advanced. But what we don't realize, we're not talking about technology, we're talking about consciousness.
Mhm.
Okay. So at some levels, if we've gone through 26,000 year cycles, hundreds, thousands of times, however many times we've gone through a devolution and evolution, we didn't need maybe computers and technology. And when you're at a conscious level, a level of consciousness, you need external products less. We exist in this age where we're literally been at the lowest, going back up, and look at all the external reality we have.
Mhm.
We've created all these things to be able to do things that our human avatar bodies should be able to do.
Mhm.
Cultivate energy, realize we're all vibration, and be able to use the harmonics. So these ancient cultures, you don't see computers, you don't see chips, even though there are some archaeological anomalies of computers and chips, right?
Mhm.
But you don't see it on a mass level. One is because many of these things have been completely wiped out through worldwide cataclysms. And two is that they were at a level of consciousness that maybe they can use their own minds for telepathy, for molding structures together, for levitating, or
Mhm.
they needed very less extravagant technologies to do so. So going back to ancient sites now, when you go to these sites and you realize how they created these sites, you don't even know how they created it. You just know the effect of what's going on. Like you were there, you were chanting, and all of a sudden you were like realizing what was occurring. It's at a level of technological engineering, architectural genius that is unfathomable, right?
Mhm.
We need tools and technology to get to that level. How did they even cultivate that in the first place? Um, there's a video on YouTube of Brian Forrester at the Red Pyramid. They go into the King's Chamber at the Red Pyramid, and they all start chanting. And they're not chanting a specific note; they're all just chanting random notes. They get a piano, they match it up with the chants in the room. All the chants going on, all the different frequencies, all accumulated into one specific tone. A equals 432 hertz.
Really?
The frequency everywhere, all the different chants, all literally, the place was made in a way that no matter what harmonic you were creating, it would create the note A.
Wow.
You go high octave, low octave, you try to change it up, you get a guitar tuner in your face and you say something and you see it's a D note, A. So the structure was created in a way in order to take any vibration and frequency and create A. And now we have A equals the third eye, right? And then the third eye, the eye of Horus, which is a cross section of the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. Mm-hmm. And so was this chamber utilized for frequencies in order for people to get spiritual experiences, connect with extraterrestrials, or to get intuition? It could be anything. It could be level from healing chamber of sicknesses or to connect to these spiritual beings. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the hieroglyphs, it probably looks like it was connected to some sort of ET life or something, because it's just like strewed throughout everything, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll add, since we're on the topic of Egypt, I'll add this too. Great documentary. A lot of my colleagues are in it, called The Pyramid Code on Netflix.
Oh yeah,
it's a multiple part series. And in there, they break down some intense things about Egypt. But if you really want to know more about Egypt, go to Sacred Geometry Decoded on YouTube. And the mathematics of Egypt will blow your mind if your mind's already been blown. It's like beyond anything you can fathom. So in this documentary, they show that underneath the Giza Plateau pyramids, there's aqueducts underneath the pyramids. Mm-hmm. And in those aqueducts are copper rods that end into chambers inside the pyramids. So now we look at the geological studies of Egypt, and we call in Robert Schoch, who also done a lot of stuff with. Robert Schoch is the individual that has basically helped us redefine the Sphinx to be at least 13,000 years old, which doesn't make sense because 13,000 years ago, we were primitive. Who created the Sphinx 13,000 years ago, 11,900 BC? Well, through geological studies, we're now able to find that the erosion on the Sphinx is at least 13,000 years old. And through hieroglyphs and other types of scholarly research, we also know the Nile River was actually on the other side of the pyramids, but through I guess time and geology of it all, it ended up being in the position it is now. Mm-hmm. So if you look at where the Nile River was said to be in those scriptures, and then you calculate how long it would have taken to go there, 13,000 years.
Well, they even say too, with that same movement of the Nile, how it at that time too, 13,000 years ago, the Nile would also move up into Abydos, into the Temple of Osiris, right? Which is kind of buried underneath. And the water actually was right up to the entrance of it, which I mean, it definitely is not now. You have to drive for a long time to get there.
Yeah.
Right. But I've heard of those links, and even the connection from that Temple of Osiris back down underwater through to the Sphinx.
Yeah. And in Temple of Osiris is where they see the flower of life too. That was like the first depiction of the flower of life. Yeah. So, and then the Temple of Osiris to the pyramids, multiplied by another number that's of that the circumference of a pyramid gives you like the circumference of the earth. So everything was positioned in such like incredible engineering. So in regards to the Nile River, what would happen is, I don't know what seasons, every now and then the Nile River would overflow. Okay. As the Nile River would overflow, the water would go where? Into the aqueducts underneath. So what happens when water goes into an aqueduct at a fast rate, and then there's copper rods? Well, it creates an electrical current. So the electrical current would carry up the frequency into the copper rods. But what happens when the copper rods ends into a hollowed out chamber? It becomes a sound frequency going into these chambers.
Amazing.
So it was, so I don't think the pyramids were just for one thing. I think they could have been for connecting to star beings, healing from sicknesses and illnesses when we started devolving in consciousness, because there was at a time where a lot of illnesses probably didn't exist because it goes back so far. And then also there were batteries to keep the energetic grid of the planet at a certain level, because we were devolving in consciousness. And this pyramid culture was actually worldwide. There's pyramids in India, there's pyramids in China. This is not alternative. This is mainstream at this point. There's pyramids in the US, and that's a whole other topic that I go in on another presentation of the deliberate destruction of advanced pyramids in North America. Because why is it that advanced pyramids start right at the Mexican border? Oh, because North American people were more primitive, which gives us more reason to have done what we did to them. Well, even though it wasn't me, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like, so it looked like they could have been some sort of structures that were on energetic ley lines of the earth. So they were harnessing the natural frequency of the earth, but then a little electrical current utilized in these ways that I said, very organically, very acoustically, that powered up these things to create a grid work around the planet to keep us at a certain level of consciousness. Now, back to the video on Brian Forrester, is when he was in the Red Pyramid and they were doing all this research, all of a sudden there's this huge crack in the pyramid, and it's from an explosion. And the crack in the pyramid is looked like to have happened maybe around 13,000 years ago. And this goes into the theory that the pyramids overpowered because they weren't able to sustain at a level. So we basically devolved in consciousness. And then when we got to a certain level that we had to drop down in consciousness no matter what, the pyramids couldn't sustain the energy anymore, and they're overpowered and they went offline, right? And then as we evolve again, chances are either we'll create some new structures or these same structures can be utilized once again.
Now, do you think that's connected to the missing top caps of the pyramids, especially in Egypt?
Yeah, because it was, because the whole thing was like limestone and was like beautiful and was smooth and reflective and conducted electricity. So the original, not only the top part of it, but the whole entire thing was even more efficient to conduct electricity than it is now. And most of it has either been decayed or actually gone missing. So I feel that the whole structure, including the outside casing of the pyramids, were all utilized to harness the frequencies of the earth.
So interesting. And I love that. And, you know, jumping back to what you said about the spider and the spider web, I get a lot of messages from the universe, if you will, Mother Earth, about the symbolism of the spider, sometimes considered like the grandmother spider, the weaver, the weaver of things. And I love how you're saying that symbolism of the spider also connects to harmonics and frequency, because I mean, if we just, like a lot of people have seen, if you put flour on top of a speaker and you play different tones, right, different notes, it's going to shift into different geometric patterns, which can all in essence look like a spider web.
Exactly.
In one form. So I love that linking you did there. That's a great visual, I think, for a lot of people. And I love that you are talking about all these things. I mean, there's so much more obviously you can talk about on this, but you're talking about all these different things because it's really about exposing or revealing or surfacing ancient truths to bring them back into consciousness.
Exactly.
To bring people into awareness to utilize that. And I think the fact that a lot of this is coming to the surface probably means that humanity is moving into a position where we can remember, right? Utilize, change more than we are. So, I mean, we could definitely talk all day long, Neil. And I would love to have you back on the show for a different topic, deep dive into, but any other things that you would want to leave viewers with about, you know, things, whatever it may be? What are your thoughts that you would love to leave people with?
I'd like to leave people with hope. You know, like, it's to me, scientifically, musically, spiritually, esoterically, it's been proven that we're up on this uplift of consciousness, that there's this mass awakening happening. I love to, like, when I first got into doing Portal to Ascension, I used to say, even though like the choir likes to come to our events, I'm not here just to preach to the choir. I'm here to show people that maybe are very linearly minded, how we're all interconnected in one, you know, which is why I put in my own presentations, a lot of scientific evidence. Like, I'm doing a presentation on tomorrow called Galactic Origins, Dimensions, and Black Holes. And for 3 hours, it's going to be nonstop dimensions, science, Milky Way dynamics, anomalies that are real, and then it ends with all the esoteric of how galactically connected. So it's like this journey from appeasing your linear mind to being like, whoa, there's something going on here, to then opening up to the truth. And part of that is also quantum physics, vibration, non-locality. All things, all information and awareness exist in one moment everywhere, proven through quantum physics at this point. What does this mean? You and I were all vibration and frequency. This computer does not exist as the way it exists. None of this is what it is. What does that mean? right? It means that the human experience is much more vast than we actually know and can even perceive. We also exist when there's limited frequency range, this bandwidth. So to feel that we know might only just be one fractalization closer to source. Who are we to know that we're actually completely aware of the full range of frequencies that we're able to experience, right? But one thing is for sure, that these cycles of time have occurred. Many ancient cultures have talked about it. Some of them have actually given dates, like in the Indian culture. And we are in this upturn of consciousness. It's very interesting that we've been in this age of delusion. And this age of delusion is an age where we have these advancements and we think we're the best that we've ever been because of the advancements that we have. But if you look at religion that were created in the last 13,000 years, it seems that there's been a linear progression in all these ancient texts from religion for the last 13,000 years. Go back to religions and cultures that spoke about times before 13,000 years ago, they have a whole different perspective. There's this circular time. We evolve, we devolve, right? So some sort of cataclysm happened in the Younger Dryas, probably an asteroid, a solar flare, something. This is already conventionally accepted, reset society in many ways, and we had to linearly progress to where we are now. So that's what we pretty much see when we look at the history books and religion, right? But then you go a little further back, and all of a sudden we're seeing Göbekli Tepe, we're seeing all these advanced structures that should not have existed at these times. So what's happening now is a collective remembrance. First of all, we're put in this reality with amnesia. We don't remember our past lives. We don't remember extraterrestrial lives. But just look at a few documentaries and you'll be proven without a reasonable doubt past lives exist, okay? So the fact is we don't remember them. What would happen if we start unlocking our consciousness, expanding and unlocking our DNA, and start tapping into a more of an awareness within our own brains, because we only use a certain amount of it, right? We may be able to remember not only who we are and where we came from, but we're also probably able to live life more intentionally and not so reactory because of our lack of understanding of who we truly are, you know? And I feel that that's where we're heading right now. Part of it is going to be that we're experiencing and seeing a lot of chaos, but it's only because these traumas are coming up to the surface to be experienced, right? And I'm throwing out bullet points right now. Obviously, there's like a lot more depth of evidence behind all this, but we're coming up to a point where we're entering the singularity for the next game of life, for the next virtual reality, holographic, conscious, organic projection, if you will, of reality. And as we're doing that, the only way to get there is for us to do the inner work. So I did an article years ago called "What Does UFO Disclosure Have to Do with Meditation?" And it was like, unless we do the inner work and work on ourselves and consciously, we're not going to be at the frequency where we can even interact with our galactic community. So it all comes down to us really focusing on ourselves, doing the work we need, releasing traumas from this life and past lives so that we can all collectively be at the same level and have balanced conversations and start progressing into the future, utilizing all the advancements that we've already created, you know?
Yeah. So well said. I couldn't agree more. I think that's quite lovely. So, I hope this helps some people listening today to kind of open their mind a little bit more. If something's pulling at you, kind of gnawing at you, to open up and explore it. Just because you're exploring it doesn't mean you have to believe it, but why not be willing to see everything you can in this lifetime, learn, see, read, experience, and then choose what's real to you. I know there's many times for me, I've had an experience or communications from spirit, and I'm like, whoa, that's too much for me. But then 2 years later, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I can bring that in now. Right. So if we have a willingness to be open-minded, we can really enrich our journey beyond what we can imagine. So Neil, I have to thank you so much again for being a guest today, for joining us, sharing all your expertise. I definitely encourage everybody to check out portaltoascension.org for everything that you offer, the events and all the things. And we'll definitely have you back on the show because I would like to go down some other rabbit holes with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, that would be great. So to all of you watching, thank you so much again for joining the show. And I'll be back again next week with more.